Hello and welcome to the Quilling Quarter. My name is Charlotte. Today I thought I'd take a step back in time and explore some Renaissance quilling from this book, which is titled Devotional Creations from Cloistered Orders, Quilling. This book is a collection of photographs from an Italian art collector. The majority of this book are photographs of his collection, which feature hundreds of photos of reliquaries, wax figures, embroidery, and importantly for us, quilling from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, mostly from Italy and France. A lady by the name of Elena Geuna curated this book and interviewed both the collector and the photographer. We never actually find out who the collector is. He's simply referred to as the collector. The photographer, on the other hand, is Nan Goldin, a well-known photographer based in New York City, who famously held an exhibition titled Sopophilia. In this book review, I will summarise the book, and the interviews with the collector and the photographer, and show you some of the incredible Renaissance quilling pieces. Then I'll show you some of the pieces that I really liked, and the piece it inspired me to make, and I'll finish with my review of the book. So to start with, a summary of this book. This book is in Italian at the start, but the interviews and the art descriptions are translated into English at the back. So some of the quotes might sound a little bit funny because they're direct translations. Published in 2012, this book starts with an interview with the collector, and he tells us how he came to have such a massive collection of Renaissance quilling pieces. In some instances, quilling is actually referred to as paper rolls. The interview with the collector was conducted in Turin in January 2012. When the curator, Elena, asked the collector how he came to collect religious art, he said,
"I needed something more concrete, or more spiritual, that could give me a new, special emotion. Something perhaps closer to spiritual than material sensitivity. That's how I began frequenting flea markets. This was a significant step, because there's quite a difference between an important international gallery and a flea market. But at the bottom, it's the same thing. I began by buying plaster Madonnas. They cost very little, 10, 5 or 20,000 lira, sometimes less, according to their state of conservation. Often, these objects were on a mirror, or crystal, glass, wood, or plaster, and were beautiful. These little objects give you the same joy as a fontana. In reality, there's very little difference. What matters is the emotion you feel, and that doesn't depend on the financial value. In collecting art, the joy comes from the possibility of possessing. Not because you have the money, you buy these objects instead because you have sought them out and found them. They convey a sense of happiness and of serenity. These are two similar ways of collecting. Not for others maybe, but for me they are, for what they give me when I buy them. The emotion of the discovery in the first instance, and then of possession. These small objects convey serenity and joy to me. I like them a great deal. They are a form of expression I need in life. I can do without food for a paper roll. I could sacrifice a lot of things, perhaps even a journey or a holiday, as long as I have these paper rolls I like so much.
The collector said, after he collected thousands of Madonnas, it was logical to move on to more important objects. He bought his first one in a flea market near Turin.
It was without a frame, without glass, dumped there, full of dust and creepy crawlies, almost completely destroyed. I bought it, took it home, and restored it completely. I saw that it changed, perhaps in my eyes only, because I put so much love into it that it became a truly marvelous object. And then I said, there, these are the objects that I like, and I began to collect paper rolls.
After the interview with the collector, we move on to the interview with the photographer Nan Goldin. This was also conducted in Turin at the end of 2011, and their discussion starts with talking about the emotion she feels with her photographs, how they bring back memories but not moments. The curator asked her how she became acquainted with paper rolls and what drove her to show such an interest in collecting them and displaying them in her bedroom. She replied, I don't collect them specifically because they are paper rolls. I collect relics. I have a vast number of relics, be they saints or bones of saints. The paper rolls are one of the most beautiful presentations of ways of showing relics, but the prime aspect for me is that are relics. I don't really know why, but it sort of became a consuming obsession for me about 10 or 15 years ago when I started collecting these objects. In my opinion, and from reading these interviews, both the photographer and the collector come across as somewhat eccentric, slightly obsessive types in their interviews. They discussed in depth the idea of collecting and what it means to them, and they also discussed the spiritual side of art. So now I want to show you 6 pieces that I really liked. When I was flicking through this book the first time, I flagged 6 designs that I really liked, and I think it was a mixture of the design elements and colours that really grabbed my attention. The first one is titled A Pair of Agnus Dei. It is a wax centre with quilling decorations and a wooden frame dated in the late 17th century from Italy. The quilling decorations are a series of gold coils shaped into teardrops and ellipses, and against the black background I think it is really effective. The second piece is titled Reliquy with Agnus Dei. This design is bone, wax, paper, cotton wool, coloured glass fragments and fabric in a painted wooden frame dated around the late 18th century from France. While this is quite a busy design, I really like the detail and the different quilling elements. You can see S scrolls, V scrolls, C scrolls, tight coils, loose coils shaped into teardrops and zigzagging. I like the shapes within shapes idea and the use of different mediums such as coloured glass and cotton wool. And I think you can see a lot of techniques used by modern quilling artists today in this design. The third design that really caught my attention was another Agnus Dei, which is wax, paper, fabric and silver thread in a wooden frame, dated between the 17th and 18th century from Italy. I would have loved to have seen what this looked like when it was first made. I think the colours of the paper have faded quite a bit now, but even so, I really like the repetition of the tight coils around the wax figure, and then the leaf and vine inspired designs around the other 4 wax figures. You can see the different shades of golds and greens for the leaves, and I imagine these colours would have popped a century ago. The fourth design I want to show you that I really liked is titled Reliquy with Agnus Dei. Again, made from bone, wax and paper in a sculpted and gilded wooden frame from 17th century Italy. This is a fantastic design. I love the balance of the straight lines and curves and how precise the pieces are. You can see the on-edge vines with loose coils coming off and then some closed loose coils shaped into ellipses to make flowers and leaves. I really like the dark and light here and the use of shadow. And you can really see the gold edge paper in this design used to a stunning effect. The next design that blew my mind is this one. It is titled Retable, and it is made of bone, biscuit, paper and cotton wool in a gilt wooden frame from late 19th century France. The designs I've shown you so far were all relatively shallow, if not 2D, but this one is actually 10 centimetres deep. You can see the shadows the columns and the decorations have created against the background, and the level of intricacy involved in this piece is crazy. The scrolls, the zigzagging, and how the quilling climbs up the columns. I think it is amazing. I had to look up what retable actually meant, and it translates as a framed altarpiece raised slightly above the back of the altar or communion table, and it's where you place the cross, ceremonial candlesticks, and other ornaments. The 6th design that I really liked from this book was this one, titled Holy Family. It is made of fabric, paper and lithograph in a gilded wooden frame from late 19th century Italy. This design is so bold and eye-catching. I love the contrast of the gold against the black and the straight lines next to the curved lines. The picture in the middle is framed beautifully by the quilling, and I think it makes it stand out. This is by far and away my favourite design from the whole book. So while these 6 designs stood out to me when I first flipped through the book, after reading the account from the curator, there were 5 others that caught my attention, which show scenes of nuns in their cell showing their closed living and simple conditions. All 5 of these pieces are from late 19th century France. As the curator Elena Geuna says, the nun's box was neither a reliquary nor a little paradise, but an object of devotion. It reveals daily life within the convent and enables us, the spectator, to discover the intimate environment of the nun's world. The bed, the work table, the work itself, the discipline and the modest decor associated with the spirituality of her religious life. Its closed layout satisfied the nun, who saw it in the evocation of her own confinement and depiction of her inner attitude. It is a summary of the nun's spiritual life and the sublime moment of her religious commitment, her acceptance of God's intentions for her modest person. This is the essential message the item conveys to her outside family and to the world. All of these designs give us an insight into the women who actually made these incredible pieces and were the original influences of modern quilling. They are essentially self-portraits and give us so much more depth into the pieces to actually see the sorts of women who made them. And these pieces are even more interesting to me because this is where we actually get a glimpse into the women who created these works of art. The piece I tried myself. This design I showed you from the book, the 6th one, was the one I liked the most, titled Holy Family. As I mentioned, I really liked the straight lines contrasted against the flowing lines. And despite being from mid-19th century Italy, I think this design is actually quite modern. When I first saw it, I thought it would be perfect to decorate mine and my partner's wedding that was supposed to be earlier this year. But unfortunately, COVID got in the way, and with 5 days' notice, we had to actually postpone our wedding until next year. So there's no wedding photo to decorate yet, but fingers crossed for 2022. Anyway, without a wedding photo to decorate, I dug around in my cupboard and found this watercolour postcard from Tower Bridge in London. I bought it from a street vendor on the Thames in 2015 when I lived there. To decorate, I chose an off-white colour and replicated the loose coil teardrops, straight V's and middle line with the V's having a slight tease outward to create an interesting shape. And then to contrast against the straight lines, the corners each have V scrolls and flowing lines extending out. I started my design like this, but my brother, who has an incredible eye for design, suggested I change it up a bit. While still using the elements from the original inspiration piece, we mixed it up a bit and came up with a different way of arranging the elements. We came up with this design, but it still looked washed out. The off-white quilling paper against the pure white background just really didn't look good. So my brother suggested spray painting the border charcoal to contrast against the off-white, similar to the inspiration piece, which is black. So we did that, and I put the design on it again, and I think it looks fantastic. And to finish, I ordered my very first shadow box and mounted the final product inside it. And I am so happy with the design, and I think it looks awesome. This is by far and away the most intricate piece I've ever made. There are 168 individual elements in this piece, and it was so time consuming to make each of the V-scrolls even. And this is the first piece I've made with such repetition, where their emphasis is on making a whole series of even pieces in a recurring pattern. And I've definitely practiced a newfound sense of patience when gluing this piece. But overall, it is one of my proudest pieces, and I'm so glad I persisted with it, even after all those weeks of frustration. My review. What surprised me most about this book is that it is literally titled Quilling and features an enormous Renaissance quilling collection from an Italian collector, yet there is very little emphasis, let alone respect, paid to the art of quilling itself. And in some parts it actually talks down on quilling. The curator Elena Geuna says in her introduction to the book, "On speaking with the collector, we discovered that what seems to be jewels and works of talented goldsmiths are actually nothing more than little strips of paper, coloured and rolled by nimble hands of cloistered nuns." Both the collector and the photographer even said that they don't specifically care for the quilled items. The photographer Nan Goldin said that paper rolls are one of the most beautiful presentations of ways of showing relics, but the prime aspect for her was that of the relics. I feel like with paintings, photographs, even drawings, part of the joy of seeing or collecting these works is understanding the artist and work out the meaning for the piece. How the artist applied that brushstroke. How the photographer juxtaposed the light and dark. And how the drawer expressed a mood. But neither the photographer nor the collector expressed particular interest in the art of quilling, nor the people who quilled them. They are merely an interesting collector's item, and there was barely a mention of the creators of these pieces, and where there was, it was in a slightly derogatory way. Elena says, the articles they made weren't considered works of art. They were made simply and with few means, mostly odds and ends. I was really surprised by this. The curator also says in her introduction, so little is known about these fragile pieces that they have never been studied or protected over the last century and have always been regarded as bondessuries, which translates to church ornaments with little artistic merit. Many have been destroyed. I feel like there is a real lack of emphasis on the art of quilling in this book. In a book specifically dedicated to 17th, 18th and 19th century Italian and French quilling, remarkably little was explored or discussed about it. The curator of this book, Elena Geuna, explains this when she notes works were rarely signed, and as they were handed down generation to generation, it makes dating these objects a very difficult task. This was slightly disappointing to me. Not only that we don't know much about the women who made these pieces, but also that this book just didn't seem to investigate much into it either. Quilling is such an interesting art form, with an interesting history, and it just seemed like such a lost opportunity to not explore it more in the discussions or in the text. But overall, I really love this book. While I found it slightly disappointing that there was little emphasis on the art and the process of quilling itself, or on how or why the nuns made these intricate pieces, I found it interesting to take a step back in time to see the Renaissance quilling pieces and reflect on them and how they've influenced and inspired quilling artists today. And I especially liked seeing the self-portraits of sorts of the nuns who would have quilled these pieces. I also found the interviews with the collector and the photographer really interesting, despite them not actually being that interested in the art of quilling as much as the idea of collecting quilling. And despite the trials, I'm so proud of the piece that I made, inspired by one of the designs from this book. So I'd be really interested to know what your thoughts are on Renaissance quilling. Can you recognise certain styles from any of these designs in modern quilling today? And have any of these designs inspired you to try a different style? And what are your thoughts on the history of quilling and how we know relatively little about it? I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. Please let me know. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care till then.